This is my quick spoiler-free review of the newest film in the John Wick franchise, Ballerina. Starting out with my positives, I think Ana De Armas gives a good performance as Eve, and I think she solidified herself as a mainstay action star. You could really tell that she put in the work for this, and it really does show in the action scenes. And speaking of the action, I think they did a lot of the action sequences in a very creative way, and I love how Eve is a much more scrappy fighter than John Wick is, and she uses the environment around her more than he does. Because when John Wick fights, it's more of like a work of art, and he's so surgical with everything. But with Eve, it's like she has to work 10 times harder for every upper hand in the fight, and it's really fun to watch. But the standout action sequences for me are definitely the grenade one and the flamethrower one. And those two will probably go down to some of my favorite ones in the entire franchise. But I'm not gonna say too much about them so I don't spoil them, but y'all need to see them for yourself on the biggest screen possible. I'm just glad that they kept that super high standard that John Wick 4 set with the action. And speaking of John Wick, when he does show up throughout this movie, I wasn't saying to myself, oh, thank God John Wick's here to save this movie, because Ballerina did a great job of keeping me sold on Eve as a character, and I was invested in her journey throughout the story. Norman Reedus has some dope scenes, and it's kind of cool to see him fight in a different way than he did in The Walking Dead. Ballerina subverted my expectations in a lot of ways, especially with the way it flipped a lot of the action cliches on their head, and I really appreciated that because there were a lot of scenes where I thought I knew where they were going because I've seen a lot of action movies, but they end up just flipping on a dime, and that's just so cool to me. And of course, with every John Wick movie in this franchise, the cinematography and the visual style are a huge standout. And this movie looks just as good as the other John Wick films, if not better than some entries, especially during the nightclub sequence, because I was just in awe of the color palette in that scene. But getting to some of the things that I'm mixed on in the movie, and that would have to be the villain. And while the main villain has some pretty good scenes and some memorable line delivery, and I really do enjoy the actor's performance as him, but honestly, he's just forgettable in the grand scheme of all of the great John Wick villains that we've had so far. And now getting to my only real clear negative of the film, which is going to be the story, because the story of Ballerina is pretty generic, and the first 15 to 20 minutes of this film were really dragging. It was just struggling to hook me, but once this film did, it did not stop getting better for me until the credits rolled. But if this film does get a sequel, I do think it's going to have an advantage of not having the 15 to 20 minutes of setup, and we can just get into the good shit right away. But overall, Ballerina is easily the best action film that I've seen this year so far. It's also my biggest surprise of this year so far because I went into this film with pretty low expectations. And like I was saying earlier, when this film did hook me, I instantly regretted doing that. But if you haven't seen Ballerina yet, I do think you should give it a shot if you are a fan of the John Wick franchise. I do think it's better than at least one of the John Wick movies, but to be fair, all the John Wick movies, including Ballerina, would at least get a 4 out of 5, which leads me to my scorecard of Ballerina. But y'all let me know what y'all thought of Ballerina, and make sure to follow for more movie content.